So a man is convinced that he's Santa Claus, and pretty much next thing you know, the trial of the century is basically the case of whether or not he's a lunatic or if it's true. That's basically the story of Miracle on 34th Street. I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds.
Chin chin, as every English person says, apparently.
Right. Alrighty. So this time around, I think, as we kind of get closer to the holidays, the thing that kind of, what we see with these holiday movies is this kind of recurring idea of that kind of faith / beliefs and stuff like that is really like kind of something that I think we struggle with and kind of like in this modern world more and more and stuff like that. That on one hand we want to believe in kind of miracles and Santa Claus, and the other like we kind of really become so cynical that like we tend to think of it as like just another way to sell more toys and stuff. So I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts were kind of on this idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real conflict, isn't there, with Christmas, in that you're told that it's all about, being altruistic and giving to other people and thinking about people and empathizing. But at the same time, your capacity to do so is sort of marked by your monetary value and your ability to go out and buy gifts for people. So sort of mass consumerism, but also kind of like all the best sort of traits of human existence at the same time. So it's kind of a difficult one, and I think kind of consumerism is generally winning in that battle, I would say.
It's funny how we kind of talked about that in Brave New World and stuff, about like kind of this world that's kind of created that really pushes consumerism and stuff. And again, that was an engineered world, but meanwhile in the real world we were kind of again headed that way without like some master mind kind of driving us that way. And certainly we see that each holiday that like it seems like before it used to be that like the Christmas stuff wouldn't be out until after Thanksgiving, and then it became after Halloween. And most recently I could swear that like I saw stuff out after the 4th of July. There was already a Christmas section at Target stores, so I don't know.
Yeah, and there's also this sort of the origin of Black Friday. Is it just because you're trying to get your company into the black, so to speak, and out of the red? There's right. So much retail is done at the end of the year. I mean, if anyone who's been trying to find a PS5 this holiday season, like myself, they will have known it's very difficult. And there's no coincidence that these companies make all their console launches in November.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, apparently, like that's even like this kind of psychological trick. I think you and I talked about it offline. That basically they know that like these parents are gonna be desperate to look for it and stuff, and then they'll make it available in February. So then when Johnny kind of asks for dad, like, hey, you didn't get me that for Christmas. Can you get it for me now? And stuff like that. And so sure enough, every year, like the one author, I forget the name of it, of the author of Influence and stuff, he was basically saying that like he was with this other gentleman at the store and noticed, we kind of looked at each other and noticed that like they're like kind of just, almost like clockwork and stuff. And these companies know that like kind of that there's this like even more demand they'll create by making it scarcer, around this time and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I think in general, the whole psychology behind making things scarce and exclusive and limited edition is like well ingrained in most marketing and product manufacturing companies, I would say. So, yeah.
So yeah,
anyway.
I mean, yeah, definitely. We have with the first, the 1947 version of Miracle on 34th Street. I mean, clearly, like like this kind of struggle, if you will, between commercialism and the spirit of Christmas and stuff. Right after, like the main character kind of replaces the drunken Santa and stuff. He's kind of basically thrown in the role of the traditional take your picture with Santa or the sit on Santa's lap and get your wish kind of thing. And next thing you know, he's like promoting these other stores. And so at first the reaction from the store manager was like kind of being aghast, like what are you doing, kind of. But then turn around, and the customers and the public have this reaction to like, hey, if Macy's, and which of course in itself is kind of funny that that's the store that's promoted here. What are you doing, kind of promoting other stores and stuff. But then the parents start kind of giving a favorable reaction, and then the Macy's himself starts promoting it as a sales strategy and stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean it's quite an interesting that they've actually even got the original Macy's store mentioned in the movie, and it's so high profile. It made me sort of wonder, I guess it was at a time where that would be some serious product placement, but I don't know that Macy's actually like paid for half the movie or something like that. But I wouldn't have thought so. I would have thought it's just that, the Macy's Christmas Day Parade was such a big, or is probably still such a big thing. I couldn't help thinking though that like, if you'd asked those people 70 years later, if you were watching the Macy's parade, there would probably be everyone wearing masks and distanced, and probably a few people, security guards hanging by. They'd probably think they were in some despotic dictatorship compared to their lives in 1947. But it's an interesting change to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like one of those things that you just probably couldn't explain to somebody, and even like kind of with a time machine or whatever, it's kind of transporting, they probably would still have a hard time believing that it was really happening and stuff. So
I'm sure. Yeah. But sorry, go on.
I was gonna say here we have Maureen O'Hara as the person who hires the Santa, played by Edmund Gwen, and then she's kind of quite skeptical and stuff, and then like this is kind of where we first start seeing this kind of this idea of the conflict between the modern cynicism and then kind of the tradition of faith, goodwill towards men and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's this. I think the argument between Gailey and Doris later on is kind of the real linchpin which this whole movie kind of revolves around. Yeah. Is this idea that everything has to be completely rational and fact-based, and if it's not, then there's something kind of psychologically wrong with you. And his argument is that it's the gaps, the intangible parts of life that we can't quite quantify, or that actually make life worth living. Which I suppose Santa Claus kind of fits into that category. But,
yeah, Frank Gailey's, I mean, pretty idealistic for a lawyer and stuff. I feel like this is like kind of a glimpse of like kind of these I don't know, like these Hollywood lawyers, or like kind of these lawyers that like in these movies, right? Like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or some of these a few of these other movies where basically you had this idealized this idealistic kind of person of the law, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how we sort of see the last line of defense really for someone is, can the lawyer get them off or make the case? And there's often heroic characters who are like the lawyer who stands up for the little guy and doesn't make much money, but he's generally idealistic. I could kind of think of the sidekick in Daredevil would be one obvious sort of example I could think of, but there's plenty more in all sorts of movies. And I mean, it's I think Doris as a character is she's quite interesting in that she's obviously very successful and independent and fairly rational. So she's quite a sort of modern character in that take.
Definitely.
In that she's doing quite well in the commercial world. And I think she's obviously a character that's supposed to appeal to the post-World War II woman who's been working in the factories and has been quite independent and is now sort of readjusting to life after the war. But she's a pretty sort of strong character in that respect, and has obviously raised her daughter in the same way. You know, a young Natalie Wood, who's quite interesting to see in this. You know, known for Rebel Without a Cause and various other movies later on, and she does a great job as well. She's very good as the little girl, I would say. Yeah,
she's definitely no lightweight. Like as a child actor and stuff. I mean, compared to some of the other child actresses, she's definitely probably one of the strongest. And so it's clear to see like how she, ended up developing a career. Like that's actually something pretty uncommon to have a child actor that kind of succeeds like kind of later on.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I do almost routine now. Whenever we watch one of these originals or remake, if there's a kid in it, I always sort of like Google what happened to them. But yeah, I mean, it was surprising to see that was Natalie Wood. I think as well was also, I think you picked up on this as well, was the idea that, Gailey would have been left alone with like a 6 or 7 year old girl for hours on end while her wife was out working. And it was like, yeah, that just probably wouldn't, not someone who's not particularly close to the family or anything.
No.
That just wouldn't happen these days. So, yeah, interesting to see again how times have changed a little bit there.
Definitely.
But, yeah, I thought the other thing that was interesting was this idea of like sort of socially conscious PR for marketing. Because Santa's, or Kris Kringle, I should say, is sending these people to other stores. There's this whole idea of the public's perception of you as a brand and your company is kind of comes home to play in that movie, which is quite cleverly dealt with, I thought, and explained it in an interesting way.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I feel like now it's like kind of we know of more companies kind of promoting themselves that way and stuff, but I think probably like more towards like the height of the ad era and stuff, the kind of Mad Men era, like it was more about like kind of the product, or all about selling the product and stuff, and that was like kind of in the end what was paramount and stuff like that. I can't think of many ads, like kind of other than public service announcements and stuff that was really about kind of anything to do with the public good and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a real rarity, and it's quite prescient, I would say, in this movie that they even feature that. Right. I think it's also quite interesting. They've got Gimbals, a competitor, also mentioned in the same movie, and they're just referencing actual stores, and they have fictionalized owners of each store. It's something you probably, well, you certainly don't see it in the remake, but you don't see that very often in a movie these days.
Yeah,
I don't think most companies would be willing to have themselves fictionalized of their selves. And yeah, the other thing I really I thought was kind of funny was this idea that they were going to get a bonus based on the parade and the retail sales, but it was made out like this bonus was going to be life-changing.
Right.
I thought even in 1947, I don't know, they would have handed out such enormous bonuses like they were talking about. But yeah, these aren't hedge fund managers or something we're talking about. Right. But anyway, yeah. The other thing that was, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, like, the one thing that kind of struck me was like kind of the psychology test of whether or not kind of this was a sane Santa and stuff. And to me, like it was so ridiculous that the test they came up with was basically like Trivial Pursuit, where basically you're asking like who was the president or stuff like that like like as if like I guess apparently a psychopath or a sociopath would like not know these things, or like kind of, which actually as we probably have talked about different times, it'd probably be the opposite. They'd probably be more intelligent and more likely to know these things.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways though, I think Kris Kringle is a bit of a psychopath because well, he's obviously highly, he executes very well. He's memorized all of the answers to these things. He's completely delusional, but he's very good at what he does, and he has a very sort of fixed set of beliefs that he's just a do-gooding psychopath. I think. I don't know.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, I think that's a very. I mean, I don't know how accurate that would be to 1947 of what a psychological test would have been. I mean, you know, Freud was around, I'm sure, at that point,
Right.
and I'm pretty certain the psychological test would have been a little more intensive than Trivial Pursuit about which president was, you know, in power when and things like this. So it paints. It's a very kind of anti-psychological, you know, anti-psychology movie in that respect, because it does kind of paint psychologists as these people who are just sort of, you know, destroying all the fun, and will you know, they'll commit Santa Claus at any given opportunity.
Right. This one attorney I was watching, like he was analyzing, you know, the movie from a legal perspective, and he was saying that, like, you know, if you've got a psychologist or psychiatrist on staff and stuff, you've got bigger problems.
Right. Yeah, that was quite interesting. A staff psychologist. I didn't really think of that as. I mean, I suppose kind of like an HR department is not really there for somewhat, but yeah. And I think the idea of, I mean, the whole character of Al is quite interesting and very different from the remake. I mean, the first thing that got me about the Al character is that he's there going, you know, I kind of like to dress up as Santa Claus and go and help people, and because I got my own padding, right? And the guy is like, he's svelte. It's like he's supposed to be as fat as Santa in the you know, the narrative of this story. But I mean, by today's standards, you know, he's skinny. And actually, you know, Santa, Kris Kringle was pretty thin, really, in all in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, that was very interesting. But you know, he this idea that Al would just keep going and talking to the Macy's staff psychologist, if there is such a thing. And he would be filling his sort of mind with these, you know, ideas of, you know, sort of self-worth would be damaged by talking to this guy, and how he'd mess up his idea of his relationship with his father and things like this was quite strange, really. It's almost like they went out of their way to saying, you know, that if you overanalyze your mind, then and you eradicate all faith, then you're destroying what's good about being a human being. I think that's kind of how I interpreted it anyway. But
yeah, it's funny too that, like, you know, when we're talking about things of faith, right, where like at the end of the day, like, kind of the basic idea for any religion is that, like, in matters of faith, in the end, ultimately, it's not about having proof and stuff. It's about just simply that belief, that having, you know, like, simply believing, you know, that in itself is, so it's like kind of this, I don't know, like a closed loop, or like kind of this idea that, like, basically you can't really touch faith because ultimately it doesn't require, you know, like, kind of proof. It simply requires you to believe and stuff. But even then, like, you know, it's interesting how, you know, like, Susan basically, like, when she saw Santa speaking to the Dutch girl, you know, like, kind of in the language, that was proof, like, you know, like, oh, there's something magical about this man and stuff. And or at least it was the start of her, like, kind of, you know, like, being less cynical, and she was kind of like, you know, and then she was like, at least, like, willing to kind of entrust him with this kind of bigger test, you know, okay, well, if, you know, yeah, you know, you did this and that was pretty magical, but if you're really Santa, then you're gonna get me this house, you know, kind of, and I'm gonna, like, have this dad and mom now with my mom now.
No, I thought that was actually really funny, and I think the dialogue and the script in this is really quite funny.
Yeah.
Certainly in that respect, into her character and the court scene as well. But I like the fact that she raised the stakes on Santa and just said, you know, if you can get me anything, then get me a house. You know, that's pretty good. But I mean, go back to your thing about belief. I mean, well, not so much the problem, but the thing that is sort of intangible about belief is very personal. You know, it's like some people can absolutely swear hand on heart that God has spoken to them a handful of times and has told them what to do with their life. And, you know, they will have, or something amazing would have happened. They went to the top of a hill and they got like a feeling of, you know, ecstatic sort of holy inspiration or something like this.
Right.
Some people have based their entire careers on that, you know, but I mean, but there's no, that's the thing. It's so varied for different people that like her experience of faith was the fact that she could see Kris Kringle talking in many different languages. I would, Gailey's faith was already there anyway, but his sort of ability to prove that Kris Kringle was acceptable in his sort of current state of mind as a Santa Claus, but also with Doris, for her it was more, and I think this was the most sort of interesting and touching moment for me, was the bit when he does get committed, and she's there talking to her daughter, sort of saying, Susan is saying, do you think he's sad in the institution? Which obviously would be. And she said, yeah, I'm pretty sure he would be. And you get this real sense of, there's a real injustice going on as someone who's so altruistic and is being locked up because altruism is viewed as irrational. And I think that's the kind of the main underpinning point of this, is that if we go too far and we try and rationalize away some of our better values as human beings, we're really lost. And of course they do spell that out in big bold letters in the remake, but that I felt was one of the best scenes. And I think that's the point as well, when Doris realizes there's something more to this man than simply a kind of a lunatic who thinks he's Santa Claus.
Right. I mean, part of the whole thing too with like Doris's kind of journey, so to speak, in this story is that besides kind of having the doubt and stuff, she's really lost her faith in humanity, so to speak. And then so here's this person who basically, is kind of restoring faith. And then, like I said, if they did kind of lock away Santa, then like that would be like kind of basically the destruction of her faith, like in humanity. Because even though she's cynical, and like because of, I guess, apparently her husband left her or stuff like that, but she still has some hope, and she's kind of there's some glimmer of hope that like there's something more than the almighty dollar and another Christmas parade or holiday parade and stuff. And I think that's kind of like one of the things that like really is like where the trial is like also her faith on trial, or her belief in humanity on trial and stuff like that. And so she like, if you notice, like kind of, besides her supporting, friends, stuff like that, she was also there, basically, having kind of rooting for her own faith in humanity and stuff.
Yeah. And for me, the real highlight of this movie was the court case. Because for me, it's such a clever kind of piece of writing where Gailey pulls up the child of the prosecutor and says, did this man sort of, say that Father Christmas was real, and did you have any inclination that he was make believe, and who is he? Oh, he's that guy over there. Right. It's such a sort of a clever turn on that. But the other thing I really liked about this was this idea that actually this kind of belief in Kris Kringle or Santa Claus is something that no one really wants to get rid of. And I think it's kind of analogous with this kind of faith in the human, faith in humanity, so to speak, because the judge doesn't really want to prosecute him because he knows it's going to be terrible for his re-election campaign. The prosecutor doesn't really want to prosecute him because all his family hate him as a result. And they make a point of, so they're kind of saying that, regardless of our rational conscious minds, we still have this conflict internally with our own kind of faith or wanting to believe in these sort of things. So,
it was pretty entertaining to see, like I said, the kind of kids almost kind of turn on both of these folks who were trying to prove that there is no Santa and stuff like that. And then, like it was funny how like, the last straw for Mr. Macy was like kind of just envisioning like kind of, him, like the store being the one like kind of saying that, there's no Santa Claus and stuff like that. Like he had these pictures of like kind of the headlines. So that was kind of sealed the deal for him and stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think that's, it's it was very clever the way they worked into. I mean, that's what I really enjoyed about it, was actually what's fueling this faith in a way was capitalism and consumerism. Because if you think about it, Macy doesn't actually want him to be committed because it will look terrible for sales in the store. The judge doesn't want to do it because it's going to be terrible for his re-election campaign.
Right.
And the prosecutor doesn't want to do it because it will just make him unpopular, and he won't. And they actually specified that he's probably not going to get another court case either, as a result of prosecuting. Actually, no, maybe I misunderstood. I think they said he wouldn't get another case if he did commit him. But still, there's this whole sort of like tension with all of those characters, which was really clever the way they reintroduced, showed you all the behind the scenes thought process of all these characters, which was really clever, I thought. So
yeah, speaking of the kind of behind the scenes, it's interesting how the judge was like kind of the Bob Cratchit from Christmas Carol, and the political advisor is actually Fred from I Love Lucy. So it was like some interesting kind of cameos, I guess, so to speak. And
yeah, I mean, I think what was nice about this in terms of a Christmas story, in that real estate was not the bad guy in this one. It was psychology.
It was the good guy, actually.
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, real estate was the good guy. So that was kind of interesting. And also, I like the fact they didn't necessarily paint the boss of Gimbals as a particularly bad guy.
No,
they had him. Yeah. They had him just. They were both just weighing up how they deal with this situation.
Right.
So that was good. But in terms of sort of rationality, the one thing that it did stick out to me is that you've got this very kind of rational go-getter mother who's climbed the corporate ladder, and you've got this this man in her life who she's having conflict with, who's saying, all this strict common sense and rationality is ruining your life. You're going to have such a miserable life if you don't appreciate all these intangible things. And then eventually, when he's winning the case, she's just like, oh, isn't he marvelous? And then he wins, and she goes, oh, do you believe in Kris Kringle now? And she goes, oh yeah, it was just my silly common sense getting in the way. And I just thought it was really funny. All it took was a man to show me that my rational thinking was completely, ridiculous. Right. And now I'll be perfectly happy. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah, definitely echoes of Stepford Wives there. Who needs rationale and critical thinking?
Yeah. Probably the one key difference that made me between this and the remake, and this may even be a good segue to go into the remake, but one thing I found was very different with the way they treated Kris Kringle was the character of Al, because in this one, you have Al who is going and seeing the psychologist every day, and he's having his life ruined because the psychologist is telling him he shouldn't dress up as Santa Claus, and he's got a problem with his dad. And this makes Kris Kringle so angry that someone else is kind of destroying this person's self-confidence, that he's then motivated by someone else's plight to go and attack the staff psychologist. But that's very different from the remake, because he does it out of his own pride. He attacks him because if you remember in the 94 version, he's basically baited into attacking the person. So I didn't feel anywhere near as sorry for Kris Kringle in the remake as I did in this one, because in this one he's doing it for the benefit of someone else rather than his own sort of pride and self-image and his own kind of self-beliefs.
Yeah. Well, also, like I guess like you said, we'll probably just transition now to the '94 one. And that this one actually they don't have a psychologist. So family, like you said, HR department or something has replaced that function, I guess. It's kind of a strange kind of thing where they have like this almost like a conspiracy subplot that the competing store wants to take over, and that's the other thing too. Now, it's no longer Macy's because apparently they negotiated and Macy's then bite on the placement and stuff like that. So they just made up a store for this version. and then
Coles with a
Coles.
Coles,
right,
but not the real Coles.
No. and apparently it's a struggling store this time, so they kind of had this subplot of like kind of a, I guess, more of a 90s kind of corporate takeover kind of idea and stuff.
Yeah. And what was the competitor name again? I can't remember.
Something Express, like what was it? Let me see here. Drawing a blank too.
Yeah, can't remember. It was something that almost sounded like a real store as well.
Shoppers Express, that's it.
Shoppers Express. That's a very generic name, isn't it? I mean, it's hardly a replacement for Gimbals.
Right.
But yeah. I mean, it was. So, I mean, for me, the real problems with this. I mean, there's a lot of problems with it. But for one, I didn't feel anywhere near as sorry for Kris Kringle because he just seemed to, he just seemed a bit of a kind of a. He was slightly more of a psychopath than the original Kris Kringle, and he's kind of, you know, instead of the original Santa Claus being drunk and passing out and then not having anyone, in this one he's kind of like drink shaming the Santa. He says, "Hey, that's a bottle. Hey, somebody arrest this man. He's drinking." Right, and it's just like, yeah, he's pretty kind of aggressive in that respect. And then again, I mean, he's just kind of baited into hitting the person, and that kind of comes across as someone who's just kind of quite weak-willed rather than someone who's like the symbol of all benevolence of our society. Right. So I really didn't kind of feel very sorry for him as a Father Christmas. Also, I thought the daughter, you know, they made her too smart. In this one, it's like you didn't feel sorry for her because you felt like she was just about to go and walk into Goldman Sachs at any moment, because she seemed to have such a good sort of idea of what was happening at any one time, and was like a 20-year-old. So you really didn't feel sorry for her at all, because, well, I didn't anyway.
Right.
She was just, and I think that they did that quite a lot in the 90s. They made kid characters so smart that you're supposed to be surprised by it, but ultimately you don't really identify them with them as children. So you kind of kill that emotional pull by doing that.
Yeah, I guess it's like kind of the post Home Alone kind of era.
Yeah. So
you had, like you said, like kind of these almost I don't know, like genius, but is the word, but that they're like kind of, you know, pretty more than a little resourceful and stuff like that. That's kind of like seemed to be the archetype kid. It's funny how, I guess, there seems to be like this pendulum that kind of swings back and forth, where like at certain times, like kids are considered like, you know, like really just, you know, dumb and kind of silly and stuff like that, and other times they're considered like kind of geniuses, and
it's just kind of seems, isn't it?
Seems to come and go in cycles.
Yeah, and they're either cute because they're kind of dumb and they say something really innocent or out of place in a particular scenario, or they're so smart that they're outthinking the adults, and that's fun as well. So yeah. I mean, I noticed that this was directed by a guy called Les Mayfield, who was also directed such other cinema classics as Flubber and Encino Man. So my expectations were suitably low for this going into it. And that you could see that as well. I mean, a lot of the interactions between the characters just didn't really work for me. But
at the same time, though, this was like, you know, co-written with and co-produced by John Hughes, though. So that's kind of caught me off guard. I didn't really know he had anything to do with this one.
I saw that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure like how much he had to do. That wasn't clear, like how much involvement he had.
My guess is not so much from the end product, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, it was very dumb. I mean, it was kind of they dumbed down a lot of the stuff for the audience. It's like, you know, whenever Kris Kringle appeared, it was like, hey, I'm Santa Claus and I am a symbol for, you know, charity and altruism that everyone connects to, just in case nobody is aware who Santa Claus is. And there's the other bit where he kept saying, you know, if you can't have faith, you're doomed to a life full of doubt. And that was really heavily, I think they repeated that at least once or twice throughout the entire movie. Right. Once where he's saying it, then again as a voiceover, and then I'm sure they do it again. So you've got to have faith or you're going to be doomed to a miserable life, basically, was their point that they wanted to get across there.
And of course, you know, like there's the obligatory MTV effect where, like, you know, now we have Elizabeth Perkins as the mother, Dylan McDermott pre the Practice as the you know, prospective boyfriend slash you know, neighbor lawyer.
I mean, that whole relationship was completely bizarre, and there was lots of sort of scenes of him sort of beaming at the camera, but there was really no actual good script or characterization for him at all to make you identify with him. He seemed completely almost like a cardboard cutout until you got to the court case when he had some sort of decent presence. But before that, he was like just a non-character at all. And then you had, like you said, like the Dorey Walker character in this, she was so frosty towards him. It seemed like there was zero chemistry. And then he
springs like the ring on her.
I mean, that was there was not even a hint of chemistry. And it seems like, well, they just had a nice evening out and having a meal. And then he's like, I want to get engaged. And she's like, well, why would you want to do that? I mean, her and the audience are both saying, well, there's clearly no chemistry here. Why would you do such a stupid thing? And it's almost like you kind of feel like he's making her feel ashamed for not taking the ring. And just like, you know, you showed me absolutely no love, but I kept on there because I had faith that giving her a ring when there's clearly no indication that she's interested in you. That was kind of how it came across. And I just felt sorry for her, I think, in that situation.
And pro tip, guys, that strategy never works. to basically, you know, like bully a woman into you know, submission into being engaged and stuff.
Yeah, it did. It just seemed like this weird sort of emotional manipulation stroke bullying that I kind of lost any kind of sympathy. Yeah, I mean, he obviously just has it just seemed like he had a very unrealistic idea of who she was, really. So that kind of completely missed the mark for me.
Overall, there was just this kind of darker tone to this movie. I don't know what it was, but like it just the funny bits just weren't so funny, and then overall, like, kind of, you know, it just seemed like except for like the shininess to things, you really didn't feel like kind of this as much of the holiday spirit from me, like kind of just, you know, the overall, you know, movie, I'd say.
I kind of lost my faith in humanity watching this remake, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the other thing as well is like the whole court case was very kind of cynically done in that, you know, they keep upping the stakes during the case in that rather than Kris Kringle being sort of reasonable sort of temperament and not only getting up when he's now blurting out things randomly, and you just think, oh God, he's really screwed himself now. How are they going to get him out of this? And they get him out of it by basically comparing him to God. That was how I heard it. It's like, right, we can accept this guy thinks he's Santa Claus because we have in God we trust on our dollar bills. So if we believe in God on pure faith, then maybe we can believe this guy is Santa Claus, which is a pretty weak argument. I mean, on one hand, okay, Santa Claus is a kind of a supernatural figure that we all like and things, but he's not the basis of an entire society, which is what Christ is in Christianity in America. So it's a little bit different. You know, you can't just randomly let anyone come along and say, I feel like I'm this supernatural, spiritual person, so we'll let him go because of God, right?
Apparently, like, you know, the way they kind of drew the conclusions to some degree was the fact that, like, everybody in the streets of New York, like, kind of, you know, all like kind of cheered at once and stuff, you know, like, kind of, I mean, that was somehow proof then that, like, he was this kind of this supernatural presence, and that he would, you know, bring together the city of and different people and stuff.
I always hate that. I hate that when they do that. It's just like such a cheap kind of cop out. I've seen that. That's like Ghostbusters 2, when it's just like, hey, rather than us actually solving the situation, everybody just needs to kind of clap and cheer, and we'll get out of it through good feelings. It's like, oh, come on. It's just like such a lazy way of writing. See, what I liked in the original was the fact that it was actually like a legal technicality that managed to get him off. That was really clever.
Right.
This was just like, I don't know. We just give up basically.
It's interesting how like most of the things, the basic elements are done at least in parallel, if not the same and stuff. But then this one they changed, and yet like they couldn't come up with something as clever. So then, like you said, they just kind of like just said, have the girl present this dollar bill and kind of that'll sell the idea and stuff. And
it's really, the whole production is pretty cynical, really, because Brian at one point he gets up and he's there saying, "Oh, would we rather just have a truth that makes us miserable or a lie that brings us happiness?" And I'm just like, oh God, man, how cynical is this movie going to get? So I don't know, it fell pretty short on me for that. But, and then there was also that, just to add insult to injury, they had an English actor who had a very affected English accent, whose sole purpose was to come in at the beginning and say, "Oh, we might get a bonus for this. Chin chin." Like, but they said, "Oh, bye-bye." And he's like, "Oh, chin chin." It's like, no one says chin chin when they say goodbye in England. They say, "Oh, see you later, bye," whatever. Maybe even cheers at a push. But you never say chin chin. Chin is what you say when you're about to take a drink. And so he was just like some weird random Weasley English person in this. And then he appears right at the end, and is his other purpose say, "Hi, well done. You saved the day. We're going to get that bonus now. Chin chin," and off he goes. I was like, it's so annoying. And again, we're in the land of magical retail where you get a bonus that's enough to buy a house in 1994. I was like, all right, no GI Bill to help you here. This is pretty serious. So
especially coming from a store that was like on the verge of bankruptcy too, like that's also interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And have just been dragged into a lengthy court case. Sure, we'll buy you a house. Yeah. What's called in terms of the look of the production or like that all look again very polished and kind of like everything kind of was look. Especially like the Santa's workshop. Like usually like you see like maybe I think the biggest setup I've seen. In fact, at the outdoor shopping center near us, they have like this kind of small courtyard basically blocked off where the Santa's like kind of photos and stuff like that. And that's probably like the biggest I've ever seen. But in this one, apparently, again, the store that's about to go bankrupt, they put everything, I guess, into having like this, basically auditorium size, display of like presents and, and then apparently on Black Friday, like people weren't rushing to get deals; they were rushing to get to sit on Santa's lap, I guess. So that was another interesting. Yeah. It was quite. You're right. It was quite a setup they had there going on there. But yeah, I was going to say the other major difference, because I really feel like the original is such a well-paced movie. It's an hour and a half.
Right.
If you first have got the interest of seeing, Kris Kringle and how he's kind of disrupting corporate lives for retail, but then you've also got him kind of being introduced into Doris and Gailey's life, and then he's randomly sort of staying with Gailey, sleeping in his bedroom to some, which was kind of, it was quite fun and quite charming, really, and it kind of a bit sort of awkward, situational kind of comedy, and then you get the court case, and it all kind of flows together quite smoothly, and it's it's just a kind of a fun, witty kind of ride, and doesn't take too long about it. This was 2 hours. There was absolutely no real connection between Kris Kringle and Brian at all. So, and of course he's then, you know, bullying, you know, poor Doris into marrying him.
Right.
And of course we haven't mentioned the accidental wedding at the end.
Oh,
which
right.
also, I mean, there's already no chemistry between them whatsoever. He's been absolutely kind of like shot down for his bullying with the engagement ring. And then, you know, it's just like, hey, did you set this up? No, I didn't set this up. Did you set this up? No, I didn't set this up. Then, oh, what should we do then? Should we just get married? Yeah, that seems like a really good idea for the basis of the rest of our lives. With zero chemistry, yeah, let's just get married then.
Another pro tip: do not put your faith in like magically getting married, like with the setup and stuff. So,
yeah, and I kind of came away from that thinking, well, they're probably going to be really miserable. And Kris is just lucky he got away with it. And, you know, the girl gets her house. Great. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, overall, it's, you know, just interesting how they had pretty much the same formula, you know, the same elements and stuff like that. But it just kind of, in terms of how they mixed together, it just did not come out the same. I mean, it just definitely didn't flow, like you said. It also, you know, had some very kind of like, you know, like you're talking about awkwardness in the you know, having the lawyer and the Santa, you know, kind of sleeping together, so to speak. But in this one, like kind of, you know, it's, you know, like kind of just this awkwardness of like kind of, I don't know, like where the different times they would basically just kind of put the same elements, you know, in front of you, but it would just seem like that it was just that, like that was basically like, okay, now we have this moment, you know, like kind of now we have that moment, and like just basically thrust in front of you to kind of, you know, and. Yeah, I mean, just overall, like, and again, like, kind of the whole like subplot of like kind of this conspiracy and stuff like that. It was just kind of like seemed really bit much and stuff like that. You know, like kind of you had the bar with the drunken Santas and stuff, and they're basically conspiring to kind of set up, you know, Kris Kringle and stuff. And oh, by the way, the guy who they had, you know, James Remar. Playing the guy Jack Duff and stuff is his pre-Dexter days and stuff, and he's of course known as a character actor for multiple other things and stuff. So.
My favorite role of his is of course in Warriors, where he's like the tough guy in the gang.
Yes,
yeah, that's one of my favorite moments. But yeah, and you had Jane Leeves from Frasier as well.
Right.
Who was sort of, you know, a bit lost in this. I mean, it was weird in that they didn't really have. It's funny, it was 2 hours long, but they didn't really have. They tried to make this whole kind of bad guys working for the other department store. They had Joss Ackland, who was, you know, a good actor, who was there for like 2 scenes and said a few words and then disappeared. Right. And so it's like, yeah, it was a very half-hearted approach to that. And then they're both wearing badges at the end. I was just like, oh God, why would anyone do that? You know? Especially if they've been, you know, ruthlessly manipulating him into having been committed about, you know, a day before. It just didn't make any sense. So yeah, I mean, going back to the original, sort of on a sort of deeper level, perhaps, is the, you know, there's this idea in that movie that basically you shouldn't persecute people for their beliefs. I think is kind of like the underlying thing. Now, I don't know a huge amount about American history, politics, or culture. I haven't done the whole, you know, learned all the stuff about the Constitution things. But to me, that kind of strikes me as something that is kind of quite American in terms of tone and in terms of society, and that you shouldn't just be sort of randomly persecuted for a particular set of beliefs. That's kind of a sort of a base kind of democratic right in a way, I would say. I don't know if you would agree with that at all, if that's a particularly American take on things.
Well, I mean, it's definitely was, you know, like kind of, and I think that's a great point though, that like, you know, just one of those things that like they drill into you from your first day of like kind of, you know, American government or anything kind of, you know, any course that's kind of semi-related to that, is that idea that a lot of the people that came to formed the colonies and slash the bases of, became ultimately the this United States stuff, is the idea that you shouldn't be persecuted based on your faith. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to, because like a lot of them had come from Europe because of the persecution and stuff, that they wanted to like get away from that. And I mean that was like the essence of like the Pilgrims and multiple other the Quakers and multiple other founding fathers and stuff like that. And I mean, so one of the things that's kind of definitely been the key issue, in fact, like there's many different cases. I'm trying to think of any that kind of came up in movies, but of this idea that like, you should always have separation of church and state, or you should never have like kind of, and of course, in more recent years, kind of pre-COVID, we had this, president whose name shall not be spoken, that basically like, was demonstrably making a, show of like kind of how he's supporting faith and kind of, photo ops with the Bible and all that. And so it's like kind of just, the stuff that makes you kind of cringe, like, where, I mean, my personal kind of thing about it is that like, on the one hand, I have nothing, against somebody, at like the national Thanksgiving kind of dinner or whatever, holding prayer or something like that. But the other, like, it shouldn't be forced on, like kind of anybody that like, like kind of, you should either pray with us or just, get out, that kind of idea.
Yeah. No, you need to meet more sort of religious relatives or something like that. No, I've never been kicked out of dinner though, because I'm normally fairly anti that. But anyway, no, it's interesting because I guess it's this idea of, you can't have the law and faith really sort of crossing over too much, or that's never going to work too well, or it's difficult to make any case either way.
Yeah, and I guess we haven't come across this in the other movies as well, where like there's different points that like the in fact we it's been one of the problems of with like the post 9/11 kind of thing was like having this organization, right, that basically was pushing the extreme of like that, like, oh, there is no basis of government without religion. Like, so in other words, it almost seems like the pendulum swung the other way to some degrees, that like, you have the extremists who are basically saying like, we've had too much of this godlessness in the world and stuff. And it's because, like kind of, these governments have not had, the mixing of religion and faith. So it's like kind of, now we have the other extreme, like basically pushing for that, we need to kind of interject more religion, into everything and stuff. And I mean, certainly I think, ultimately it's just basically that thing of where there's a place for faith, but then there's also a thing of like that, it's, I think, to that it became one of the essential kind of things in the Bill of Rights, right? Of that, like, that you don't kind of do that. I think it's like kind of where, I mean, I think that's like kind of where it set a really good precedent for that. I don't know. I guess to me, like it's just simply a thing of where there's a place for it, but I like kind of just anytime that it's mandated or kind of pushed onto people, that's where the problems come and stuff.
Yeah.
Because like you said, earlier, it is a very personal thing of like, it's personal, it's experienced that way. It's also like kind of, that like, why should like, like why shouldn't somebody be able to, choose what they believe and stuff like that? And even I think, when you get down to me anyway, when you get down to some of the core religions and what they kind of really teach actually is that, like we want you to believe in our faith, but it's got to be your choice. That's what, to me, like the essential religions of the world, whether it's Christian, Muslim, Hindu, none of them say like, oh, like you will believe this or you will burn in hell and stuff like that. Even though that like some ultimately the extremists of those faiths have kind of said that that's what it is and stuff. But if you really peel back the layers and get down to the core of it, pretty much each one says that like, yeah, we would love you to join us, but like it should be your choice.
Yeah. Sounded like a Jehovah's Witness there. Yeah, it's it's an interesting one. This role of faith. I mean, I think as well in the liberal thing now, I almost feel like religion is fairly taboo now in some circles. It's like if you go to ultra liberal things, it's fine to be spiritual and
right.
you can have crystals, you can do yoga and all this thing, but go to church, God forbid, no pun intended. But it's interesting the role of these things. But anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what's interesting with these holiday movies, right? Where like besides the commercial / holiday spirit kind of thing and stuff, is this idea of like kind of like it's good to have these what's called holidays and faith and that kind of thing stuff, but we're not going to get too spiritual stuff. We're not going to get too much. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you certainly won't feel very spiritual after watching the 1994 version of 134th Street. That's almost guaranteed to leave a rather depressed sort of feeling of indifference in the household during Christmas, I would say. Unlike the 1947, which I could heartily recommend. So
right. Yeah, I think what's called it's interesting how once again we have a remake that hits all the marks and stuff, but yet quite somehow pretty much misses the mark overall.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange. Yeah, how they just almost every scene for scene something went wrong. I felt like.
I think before we kind of go on, I was going to just mention that I did actually watch the 73 version, which is basically a made-for-television version. With a lot of the big television folks of the era and stuff, like Sebastian Cabot. Even Roddy McDowell, Jim Backus, Mr. Howell, and Tom Bosley this time, kind of before his Mr. Cunningham Happy Days. He's the judge in this case, and then and the lawyer is David Hartman before his Good Morning America career took off and stuff. So he became quite the the morning show celebrity and stuff after this. So.
Interesting. How did you feel about that compared to the other two?
Pretty superficial. Pretty much it definitely had a made-for-television feel to it. They didn't even have a full courthouse. It was just basically like they had the characters and then like kind of they made it like a closed session, like where they set it up that way and stuff. Because I guess it was a television budget, so they were really keeping it as light as they could.
Yeah. Did they actually have Macy's and Gimbals named in that?
They did. This one they did. So I guess I don't know if like kind of they worked out the ad dollars, I guess, for this one, or kind of I imagine that like they had something worked out and stuff.
Did they have a staff psychologist on hand in that one?
And that was Roddy McDowell. Was
really?
Dr. Sawyer and stuff, and he was quite. I think it's funny how. Outside of Planet of the Apes, he's quite the fussy kind of neurotic character and stuff. That's like kind of like when you want somebody like that. And of course like after the whole Scotty Bowers book and stuff, I can kind of definitely see how like it's funny how. These things are like the way that somebody does one thing is the same that they do everything else. Because apparently he was quite that way too, like with his sexual appetites and stuff. So.
Oh, the Scotty Bowers book. Yeah, I know. We keep coming back to that virtually. I think anything that's from the 40s or the 50s, Scotty Bowers has to come in somewhere.
Definitely.
Yeah. The debate rages on as to how accurate or historically accurate it really is. But yeah. So
coming up, we've got How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and I think that'll pretty much be it for our holiday, discussions and stuff. And we'll have to kind of see about what's next for the coming new year. Any kind of shows that you're kind of really enjoying right now, or kind of really getting into during this holiday slash kind of pandemic?
I haven't watched a lot of TV, but I did watch Tenet with,
Okay.
As I mentioned, that was quite interesting. Not that it's a remake or anything, but
Right.
it is kind of interesting in Christopher Nolan's career. But and I kind of feel like we're kind of at a halfway point where time is either going forwards or backwards with his relevancy. But yeah, aside from that, no obvious sort of remakes. I would actually, I'm trying to look for some real sort of creepy English 70s science fiction to revisit, like The Day of the Triffids from the 1980s.
Nice.
Maybe The Box of Delights. I don't know if that, I think that got remade, which is really sort of a creepy 80s children's TV show made in England. So I think I'm going to rifle through that and see if I can find something, you know, something that will sort of be reassuringly creepy to see me into 2021, perhaps.
So for me, like after Queen's Gambit and Ozark, my new obsession watch is Fargo, which is a series based on the movie and stuff like that. So I feel like at some point we may be talking about this as well. Really outstanding, writing, and they've brought in like kind of just a huge like kind of gallery of different stars. I mean, like, and we're not talking like kind of like kind of the Brad Pitts or whatever, but we're talking like kind of really, good actors like, Billy Bob Thornton and, Patrick Wilson actually even and stuff is in the season 2 and stuff. So, yeah, definitely that's my recommendation for the watch, like kind of, to sit out the rest of this quarantine, I guess.
Right. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So. Alrighty, so yeah, thanks again as always for watching. John Cheng with Dan Edmonds, and we will see you at the movies.